We're back once again talking about Brandon Herrera's congressional race. Now this time we're going to be taking a look at the voting record of Brandon's opponent, Representative Tony Gonzalez. Now, if you don't know, Brandon Herrera is running for Congress in Texas District 23, primarily to protect the Second Amendment, and just because in general he is upset about Tony Gonzalez's voting record. Now, when I was making last week's video, I went through and read this statement from Brandon's campaign, talking about how they made over $1.1 million from donations, mostly from small donors. Over 30,000 different donors, which is very impressive. But what I did notice at the end here was you can learn more about Congressman Tony Gonzalez's betrayal of Texas Republicans at tonysvotingrecord.com. So I said to myself, why don't we go through that and take a look at Tony Gonzalez's voting record? So I open up this site here. You've got Tony Gonzalez's voting record. And then if we scroll down, got all sorts of things we're going to go through. But firstly, I want to point out at the very bottom here, you can see that this was not actually paid for or authorized by Brandon's campaign. This is an independent person's website. It says paid for by Dalton Sutton and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. So just want to make that clear because Brandon shouts it out in this press briefing here that this website is not associated with Brandon himself. Instead, it's the brainchild of this guy here, Dalton Sutton, who I guess, like Brandon, is upset about Tony Gonzalez's voting record. So let's go through this, right? It starts off by telling people to vote Tony Gonzalez out of Congress for betraying his constituents and the American people. It is a timer for when the primary election is. So there's 88 days left, 87 if you're watching this on the day I put it out. And helpfully here, Mr. Dalton Sutton has gone through and compiled Tony's voting record. So let's take a look, right? Tony voted for more gun control and red flag laws. On June 24th, 2022, Representative Tony Gonzalez voted in favor of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which supports red flag laws, imposes additional firearm restrictions, and expands background checks. Now, what I like about this site, and I'm not going to read through the details of every single one of these, but if you come on and you go to tonysvotingrecord.com, and not only does he explain what these things that he voted for did, but he also explains why it's an issue. It says here, Representative Tony Gonzalez's vote on this legislation is seen as conflicting with principles 1 and 8 of the Republican Party of Texas platform, which stress fidelity to the original principles of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States and Texas, and the inherent right of individuals to defend themselves and their property. I'm actually really impressed by this site. It goes into way more detail than I would have expected, but let's keep reading through. Tony refused to support the Border Safety and Security Act of 2023. Representative Tony Gonzalez, whose district covers 843 miles of the Texas border, is the sole Texas Republican not backing HR 29, Border Safety and Security Act of 2023, sponsored by Representative Chip Roy and co-sponsored by 49 other Republicans. Now, this is one of those things that just doesn't make sense, right? As this points out, Tony Gonzalez represents a district that has hundreds of miles of the border with Mexico running through it. And this guy's not voting with 49 other Republicans on a Border Security Act. Now, I don't know the actual details of the bill. It actually says Tony Gonzalez publicly criticized the bill, claiming it would block all asylum, including legitimate claims, and perpetuated the misconception that proponents of border security are anti-immigrant. He called it an unchristian anti-immigrant bill. You know what's mainstream in the Republican Party right now? You know what Donald Trump is constantly talking about? Ending the asylum claims, the fake asylum claims that are coming in, especially from Somalia right now. Trump is not happy with the asylum claims from Somalia. But how did the Republican Party get somebody in the House in a border district who doesn't support making the border even stricter and harder to cross? You could never explain that to me. He refused to sign a letter supporting Governor Abbott's, and that's the Texas governor, efforts to defend Texas's sovereignty from the Biden administration. He was the only Republican in the Texas delegation who did not sign a letter by Representative Keith Self in support of Abbott's efforts to defend Texas's sovereignty against the Biden administration's border policies. How is this guy elected in a border district? It makes no sense. He voted against requiring a warrant to spy on Americans, and he voted against Andy Biggs's amendment on the Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act, which sought to require a warrant for the surveillance of Americans' communications. Now, this is a classic Rhino move. The Rhino's brainchild is the Patriot Act, so it's not unexpected that he would still try to keep the Patriot Act alive in spirit. He voted against the Fourth Amendment is not for sale act. This act aimed to prohibit law enforcement and intelligence agencies from buying data from data brokers to circumvent the Fourth Amendment. Is this guy stupid? Is Tony Gonzalez stupid? Why would you do that? Of course, the police shouldn't be able to buy stuff from third-party data brokers. Who knows if the data brokers have the right information? He voted for an independent commission to investigate January 6th. I think this one's pretty self-evident. No Republican should have supported that witch hunt. Apparently, Tony Gonzalez was censored by the Republican Party of Texas. They censored him for repeated derivations from party principles like traditional marriage speech, Second Amendment rights, freedom, and border security. This censure, backed by a majority in his district, received 57 in favor, 5 against, and 1 abstention, making just the second time Rule 44 has been invoked in Texas GOP history. It's amazing to me that people believe that Tony Gonzalez would be better on the Second Amendment than Brandon Herrera. He voted for warrantless surveillance and woke ideology in the military. That is, he voted for the 2024 NDAA, which, to be fair, this one's not just on him. A lot of Republicans voted on this. He voted to fund a federal vaccine tracking database, the Immunization Infrastructure Modernization Act, which authorized $400 million in federal grants to expand state vaccine tracking databases. Now that's awful. Obviously, the Republican voting base was not very happy with just the idea of the vaccines to begin with, but especially any databases or ways to track them. He voted to allow the ATF to override state gun rights. That's him voting on HR 2471, which included the NICS Denial Notification Act, requiring investigations of all background check denials and provisions allowing the ATF to deputize local law enforcement and enforce federal gun laws. Gun rights organizations opposed this legislation, arguing it would override state Second Amendment sanctuary laws by compelling local agencies to participate in federal firearms enforcement regardless of state-level protections. He voted for taxpayer funding of drag shows on military bases. Amendment 175 to HR 4365, the Defense Department Appropriations Act 2024, proposed by Andy Ogles, which would have prohibited taxpayer funding for drag shows and drag queen story hours on military bases. The amendment was ultimately withdrawn, but Gonzalez's opposition drew criticism from conservatives who argued military resources should focus on national defense rather than such entertainment. I don't think you could find a single Republican voter who would be pro putting on drag shows in the military bases. I'm sorry. I don't know how Brandon didn't win last time, but I sure hope he wins this time. He voted for the Respect for Marriage Act, which threatens tax-exempt status of faith-based nonprofits opposing same-sex marriage. Obviously, that's not in line with the average voter in a deep-red Texas conservative district. He voted to send billions of taxpayer dollars to defend Ukraine's border. Again, this is not just him. A lot of Rhino Republicans are on this. I was kind of hoping that when Trump took office, we'd stop sending money to the Ukrainians, but I guess somehow they got to him too, and we're still doing that as far as I know. He voted to fund Biden's vaccine mandates. He voted for taxpayer funding of abortion. He voted against removing armed services from Syria. So basically, Tony Gonzalez has a terrible voting record. I mean, let's just be honest here. All of these things are horrible and out of line with the Republican voter base, right? Especially, I would assume that the voter base in his Texas district, down here right on the border in like deep red, like super Christian areas, I would assume that they would not be in line with the drag shows on military bases or a lot of these other things. It seems like he's completely out of touch with the voters. And of course, that's where Brandon comes in. I'm pretty sure Brandon Herrera is not going to vote or support any type of drag shows on military bases. Just a guess. I don't think he's made a statement on it. Maybe he should, but for some reason, I don't see Brandon Herrera voting to put drag shows on military bases. I don't see him voting against religious freedom, and I don't see him voting against the Second Amendment. All arguments for why I'd like Brandon Herrera to win this race. Now, this website even has more stuff. It talks about the amount of money that he's received. So he received over $2 million from AIPAC. AIPAC is in the news recently. It points out his community notes. This website just has everything. If you want to get informed about the person that Brandon is running against, it's a great resource. Like, just look at all of these different community notes that he's put on Tony's tweets. This website even gives out different pre-made stuff that you can use if you want to spread the word about Tony Gonzalez's voting record. And yeah, vote Tony out. I gotta say, 100% shout out to Dalton Sutton. This is his Twitter account if you want to give him a follow, for making this website. And you should check out this website. Not only does it have information about everything that we talked about, he also has links to the different sources for it, so you can go through and fact check anything on this site. He outdid himself on this. He also made another website called unblockmetony.com, and that's for people who are blocked by Tony Gonzalez. You can report that you're being blocked and essentially try to hold Tony Gonzalez accountable, because representatives and members of Congress are not supposed to be able to block members of the public from their government accounts. But I guess, at least according to this, he is. Now, hopefully soon, Brandon Herrera will be the one with the government account, and Tony Gonzalez will just have his regular civilian account. But who knows? I just saw this website and I thought, I gotta talk about this. It's a great website, and I would recommend anybody who's interested in the Brandon Herrera campaign to come and check this out. So once again, shout out to Dalton Sutton for making the website. Shout out to Brandon Herrera. Anyway, that's all we've got for today. Sorry, my voice is still a little messed up from my cold. What do you guys think of that website? Let me know in the comments. Can you believe some of the things that Tony Gonzalez has voted on? What was your least favorite thing on that list? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching all the way till the end. Remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day, and God bless you.